And after this I saw another dream, and I will show the whole dream to thee, my son. And Enoch lifted up his voice, and spake to his son Methuselah, To thee, my son, will I speak. Hear my words. Incline thine ear to the dream vision of thy father. Before I took thy mother Edna, I saw in a vision on my bed, and behold, a bull came forth from the earth. And that bull was white, and after it came forth a heifer. And along with this latter came forth two bulls, one of them black, and the other red. And that black bull gored the red one, and pursued him over the earth, and thereupon I could no longer see that red bull. But that black bull grew, and that heifer went with him. And I saw that many oxen proceeded from him, which resembled and followed him. And that cow, that first one, went from the presence of that first bull in order to seek that red one, but found him not, and lamented with a great lamentation over him, and sought him. And I looked till that first bull came to her, and quieted her. And from that time onwards she cried no more. And after that she bore another white bull, and after him she bore many bulls, and black cows. And I saw in my sleep that white bull likewise grow, and become a great white bull. And from him proceeded many great white bulls, and they resembled him. And they began to beget many white bulls, which resembled them, one following the other, even many. And again I saw with mine eyes as I slept, and I saw the heaven above. And behold, a star fell from heaven, and it arose and ate and pastured amongst those oxen. But after that I saw the large and the black oxen. And behold, they all changed their stalls and pastures and their cattle, and began to live with each other. And again I saw in the vision, and looked towards the heaven. And behold, I saw many stars descend and cast themselves down from heaven to that first star. And they became bulls among those cattle, and they pastured with them. And I looked at them and saw, and behold, they all let out their privy members, like horses, and began to cover the cows of the oxen. And they all became pregnant, and bare elephants, camels, and asses. And all the oxen feared them, and were affrighted at them. And they began to bite with their teeth, and to devour, and to gore with their horns. And they began moreover to devour those oxen. And behold, all the children of the earth began to tremble and quake before them, and to flee from them. And again I saw how they began to gore each other, and to devour each other. And the earth began to cry aloud. And I raised mine eyes again to heaven, and I saw in the vision, and behold, there came forth from heaven beings who were like white men. And 4 went forth from that place, and 3 with them. And those 3 that had come forth last grasped me by my hand, and took me up, away from the generations of the earth, and raised me up to a lofty place, and showed me a tower raised high above the earth, and all the hills were lower. And one said unto me, Remain here till thou seest everything that befalls those elephants, camels, and asses, and the stars, and the oxen, and all of them. And I saw one of those 4 who had come forth first, and he seized that first star which had fallen from the heaven, and bound it hand and foot, and cast it into an abyss. Now that abyss was narrow and deep, and horrible and dark. And one of them drew a sword, and gave it to those elephants and camels and asses. Then they began to smite each other, and the whole earth quaked because of them. And I was beholding in the vision, lo, one of those 4 who had come forth stoned them from heaven, and gathered and took all the great stars whose privy members were like those of horses, and bound them all hand and foot, and cast them into an abyss of the earth. And one of those 4 went to that white bull, and instructed him in a secret, without his being terrified. And he was born a bull, and became a man, and built for himself a great vessel, and dwelt thereon. And 3 bulls dwelt with him in that vessel, and they were covered in. And again I raised mine eyes towards heaven, and saw a lofty roof, with 7 water torrents thereon. And those torrents flowed with much water into an enclosure. And I saw again, and behold, fountains were open on the surface of that great enclosure. And that water began to swell and to rise upon the surface. And I saw that enclosure till all its surface was covered with water. And the water, the darkness, and mist increased upon it. And as I looked at the height of that water had risen above the height of that enclosure, and was streaming over that enclosure, and it stood upon the earth. And all the cattle of that enclosure were gathered together, until I saw how they sank, and were swallowed up, and perished in that water. But that vessel floated on the water, while all the oxen and elephants and camels and asses sank to the bottom with all the animals, so that I could no longer see them, and they were not able to escape, but perished and sank into the depths. And again I saw in the vision till those water torrents were removed from that high roof, and the chasms of the earth were leveled up, and other abysses were opened. Then the water began to run down into these, till the earth became visible. But that vessel settled on the earth, and the darkness retired, and light appeared. But that white bull which had become a man came out of that vessel, and the 3 bulls with him. And one of those 3 was white like that bull, and one of them was red as blood, and one black. And that white bull departed from them. And they began to bring forth beasts in the field, and birds, so that there arose different generations, tigers, wolves, dogs, hyenas, wild boars, foxes, squirrels, swine, falcons, vultures, kites, eagles, and ravens. And among them was born a white bull. And they began to bite one another. But that white bull which was born amongst them begat a wild ass, and white bull with it. And the wild asses multiplied. But that white bull which was born from him begat a black wild boar and a white sheep. And the former begat many boars, but that sheep begat 12 sheep. And when those 12 sheep had grown, they gave up one of them to the asses, and those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves. And that sheep grew up among the wolves. And the Lord brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it among the wolves. And they multiplied, and became many flocks of sheep. And the wolves began to fear them, and they oppressed them until they destroyed their little ones, and they cast their young into a river of much water. But those sheep began to cry aloud on account of their little ones, and to complain unto their Lord. And the sheep which had been saved from the wolves fled and escaped to the wild asses. And I saw the sheep, how they lamented and cried, and besought their Lord with all their might. So the Lord of the sheep descended at the voice of the sheep from a lofty abode, and came to them and pastured them. And he called that sheep which had escaped the wolves, and spake with it concerning the wolves, that it should admonish them not to touch the sheep. And the sheep went to the wolves according to the word of the Lord. And another sheep met it, and went with it. And the 2 went and entered together into the assembly of those wolves, and spake with them, and admonished them not to touch the sheep from henceforth. And thereupon I saw the wolves, and how they oppressed the sheep exceedingly with all their power. And the sheep cried aloud, and the Lord came to the sheep, and they began to smite those wolves. And the wolves began to make lamentation, but the sheep became quiet, and forthwith ceased to cry out. And I saw the sheep till they departed from amongst the wolves. But the eyes of the wolves were blinded. And those wolves departed in pursuit of the sheep with all their power. And the Lord of the sheep went with them as their leader, and all his sheep followed him, and his face was dazzling and glorious and terrible to behold. But the wolves began to pursue those sheep till they reached the sea of water. And the sea was divided, and the water stood on this side and on that before their face. And their Lord led them, and placed himself between them and the wolves. And as those wolves did not yet see the sheep, they proceeded into the midst of that sea, and the wolves followed the sheep, and those wolves ran after them into that sea. And when they saw the Lord of the sheep, they turned to flee before his face. But that sea gathered itself together, and became as it had been created. And the water swelled and rose till it covered those wolves. And I saw till all the wolves who pursued those sheep perished and were drowned.